Hello, everybody, and you are listening to episode 70 of the RWeekly Highlights podcast. It's been a little bit, to say the least, and we're going to get into that shortly. But my name is Eric, and as always, I am joined by my excellent co host, Mike Thomas. How are you doing today, Mike?
I'm doing well. Happy New Year to everyone out there. I hope everybody's 2022 is off to a good start thus far, and we are excited to be back on the mic.
Yes, yeah, likewise. It was great, and I echo all that. Happy New Year. Hope you all had a great a break in your celebrations of the holidays. And for me, I was able to unplug a little bit and do some cool learning and spend some time with family. And so it was refreshing. But yeah, the New Year's underway. Got a lot of new things happening. And certainly, if you've been a regular listener, you'll probably notice that it has been a few weeks since we've been on air. And I do want to start off the top of the show with kind of an update on where things stand with our weekly itself and where that relates to us on the podcast. And then afterwards, Mike and I are going to have just a fun kind of informal chat about our journeys in 2021 with our, data science and analytical efforts and some of the cool things we learned along the way. So with our weekly itself, if you all had listened to like the very first episode, and if you had, congratulations, because that was a long time ago. I gave some background on how like our weekly from the very beginning in 2016 has been a community effort, completely volunteer based. Nobody is paid to do this, not sponsored by one company. And that to me has always been one of the virtues of it, is that it is from the community and for the community. And that's been one of the reasons I think has been so successful, is that we've had this shared pool of curators who have been very generous with their time to assemble all the excellent links that we put in each issue with their personal take on it, and making sure that we kind of spread that work around. Now, on top of this kind of community effort with the curation, our founder of our weekly, Wolfram Chin, has created just an amazing set of back-end tools that all of us on the curation side of it could literally use to automate and make easier a lot of this current process of how we assemble each of these set of links for each issue. Well, it was about a month ago, a little more than a month ago, that one of our most critical pieces to this curation pipeline was compromised. So, to be a little more specific, we have a very important server that has been maintained that actually automate and host a lot of these services, and it has gone offline. We're not quite sure why. We have some theories, but the bottom line is that we've had some challenges to get that back up and running, which meant that the issues that were kind of depending on that current process have been put on hold as a result. And as someone who has been so passionate about being part of our weekly, I certainly got concerned, and I started to take a look at, well, is there a way I can even help out with getting some of this back end stuff up and running? Well, I was telling Mike in the pre-show that unfortunately I just do not have the expertise and the tech stack that has been chosen to get something up and running quickly that would work exactly as it did before. With that said, our team on our internal Slack has had some pretty healthy discussion on perhaps we can turn this into a positive and make things a little easier to maintain our weekly going forward, and even make the curation process easier, to still keep the high quality, but like I said, kind of minimize a bit of the burden that's been on the curation process. So in terms of what's happening in the short term, there will be a special issue release, hopefully within a week or so, that actually aggregates all of the highlights from this past year, 2021. And then there will be kind of a set of what you might call mega highlights that will be selected for that upcoming issue to kind of do give a recap of where things stand. And certainly I'll be eager to talk about those with Mike as we usually do on all the regular issues. Now, after that point, I'm honestly not sure how long it will take to get the revised process that the R Weekly team will use to release issues going forward. So there is a likelihood that after this 2021 recap episode that will be coming up relatively soon, the podcast might be put on pause a little bit until new issues of R Weekly are released. So certainly not the ideal situation, but we're trying to take positives out of it, and hopefully it's a good chance for the team to reset a little bit and make things easier. And I always want to give my sincere thanks to everybody that's been listening from the beginning, and frankly, everybody that's been reading our weekly from however long you've been reading it. We value all of the feedback that we've been getting, and certainly as a proud member of the team, I want to make sure that it continues going, but in the way that we can sustain this in the long term. So that's kind of a current update on the status. But again, to reassure that once our weekly is back up and running, I am fully committed to keeping the podcast going. I know, Mike, you're excited to keep on with this as well. And we really enjoy talking about these every week, every issue. And it will continue on. It's just going to be slightly different. So that's where things stand right now.
Yeah, thank you for the update, Eric. And I, hope everybody sticks with us through this episode as well as into 2022 once our weekly does get back online. Like Eric said, we don't have any highlights to talk about today, but we thought we might take a little bit of a different spin on it. If you were looking for highlights, sorry, we're not going to be able to help you today, but we would like to try to keep the podcast alive today and maybe just reflect back on some things that we've learned in the past year or two as data scientists, Eric working in industry, me working in consulting, kind of having those two different perspectives, and thought that it might be useful for somebody out there listening to hear about our perspectives and for us to share that with you, and maybe some of it will resonate.
Absolutely. And as we do before each of these episodes, Mike and I get our notes together in our little handy dandy markdown based show note doc. And Mike, you got some awesome points that I'm really eager to discuss with you. So why don't you kick us off?
Sure, and I might do a little bit of interviewing you, Eric.
Oh,
So
looking forward to it.
might have to flip the mic around a little bit. But I wanted to kick off a little bit with what's changed professionally since in the last year, last 2 years since the pandemic started. However you want to think about it, I've seen a lot of studies online saying that people have overall been more productive and also working more due to working from home. And I was wondering, Eric, if you found this to be the case. It's a little hard for me to gauge because I actually left industry to start my own company on March 1st, 2020. So I don't have a great sense of, I've got a little bit of bias in my sample, and I don't have a great sense of what that transition was like because I was doing, sort of two transitions simultaneously, one out of industry and the other one into the pandemic. But
Yeah.
I was wondering, what your experience was professionally since the pandemic started versus pre-pandemic.
Yeah, that's interesting points. And this can get pretty unique depending on the type of work somebody does. But as a data scientist slash developer slash, whatever you want to call my role, it's kind of a hybrid of things. I certainly actually did benefit from the fact that I didn't have to spend 2 hours round trip on a commute. I could kind of get my work environment here at the house set up the way I like. I didn't have to worry about some of the logistical things that can occur when you work at a on-site workplace. And with that said, that's been beneficial. I've been able to balance things slightly more in terms of like making sure I'm available when the kiddos get home from school and stuff like that. But I do also want to mention that I know for me and probably a few others, either in my company or elsewhere, there is the tendency to feel like you've got to do a little more in certain cases because it seems like you're always connected now. And that is both a blessing and sometimes a curse. Luckily, it's easy for me to reach out via Teams chat to somebody who I need help with and for an urgent issue, but then they will do the same for me. And sometimes I feel like I have to still monitor stuff a little bit during the quote non-business hours, just in case something goes haywire, which actually did kind of happen in different ways before the break and even just recently. So there definitely is a tendency to not unplug as much as compared to like when you were going on site somewhere and then coming home, and just that act of the going away from the site was kind of like a way to unplug a little bit. So I think for me, there have been benefits, but then there are things I've had to try to adapt to make sure I still strike that balance now that my kind of working place is in essence merged with my home life, if you will.
Yeah, I remember my commutes to and from the office sort of being, especially home from the office, sort of being like a decompression
Yep.
time,
Yep.
right? And you actually had this ramp down period from, when you're working for 8 hours back to getting home. And now most of us don't have that, right?
Right.
We're working at our desk, and then once the day's over, it's just a walk downstairs or upstairs that kind of separates our work day from our personal day. I was wondering, because I don't have this experience anymore because we don't have too many teammates at Catchbrook yet. But when you're talking about using Teams chat and things like that, are you more cognizant of when your light is green on Teams versus maybe how it used to be? Is there any pressure to make sure that your light is always available now that people, as opposed to being offline and people really being able to notice that you're offline, as opposed to when you're in the office and people maybe not focusing on that as much? And maybe that's more of kind of pressure from management to make sure that all their employees are online because they can't see them, right, physically in the office space. Or has that not really been your experience at all?
So there's been a lot of variation, just even in my org, on how that's treated. Luckily for my personal team I work with, it's not as big of a deal because in the end, we always say, we understand that, especially during these unique times, that more flexibility is important. Where maybe something happens that we have to step away for a bit, but it's all about having that balance and making sure that if we are having issues where we're we're feeling like we have to step away for a bit, that we just communicate that with our teams and making sure that if any backups are needed to help pitch in some certain situations, we're ready for that. But I haven't felt as much pressure on that piece other than just making sure that during the core hours, I am online in a sense, and I'm making sure that I'm able to receive any urgent things or receive calls when they come in. But I know that in other orgs, I have heard about some management being a little more, you might say, careful watching that. But in the end, we just are able to let our work speak for it, so to speak.
Good, good. No, that's good to hear that you have that good culture at your organization, or at least within the team that you're in.
Yep, yep. It could have been a lot worse as this transition goes. And there are some people that it has been rougher for them to transition to it. Luckily for my type of work, I feel like I can be just as productive here with my setup. But then I knew some colleagues that actually miss being able to have those personal interactions, those hallway conversations, or quickly
Sure.
grabbing lunch with somebody. So I do sympathize with them. It has been different, but there's certainly hybrid approaches to how all this works, and we've all been learning one way or another how to best make it
Absolutely.
work. Yep.
We're fortunate enough that in tech we can still continue delivering a lot of value for our company remotely. One of the hardest things for me in the past couple of years has been networking,
Yeah.
like it was for a lot of people, I'm sure. And
Yeah.
I know that people working in the quote unquote sales profession can sometimes get a bad rap, but I feel so much for them because their job has absolutely had to have making a lot of adjustments. But in light of not being able to do as much personal in-person networking, I have found that places like Twitter and Slack have helped me network in a real way that actually feels personal to me, as opposed to cold emailing or things like that.
Right.
And if you're out there listening, trying to break into data science, or already working in data science, and you're feeling maybe like you would like to do some more networking, I would definitely recommend jumping on Twitter. There are some great Slack channels. If you're on the R side, the R for data science Slack channel, R for DS, has
Absolutely.
been phenomenal for me to feel like I'm connected to a great R community. It's given me leads on work from a professional standpoint, because there are, jobs and hiring and connect freelance channels on that Slack channel. So I would definitely recommend that if you're looking for some additional networking like I was craving, to check out Slack, and maybe even check out the Twitter R stats and Python hashtags as well.
Well said. And that was something even well before the pandemic I underestimated as I was kind of getting started professionally, which is now about, gosh, 12 years ago. My gosh, I'm old now. But when I first started getting to know the R community, I had discounted this as like, of course, back then Slack wasn't really as prevalent as it is now, but I didn't really fully grasp just how powerful that can be when used like efficiently. So once I got on Twitter, started sharing some of the things I was doing and seeing what other people were sharing and how welcoming the art community has been on, for the most part, on social media. That's been huge for me as well. And on top of this, the R4DS Slack, which again, I second how valuable that is. There are also great Slack groups for the R Open Sci project, which also get a lot of, highly high praise, well deserved. And somewhat more recently, if you're into the Discord platform, there's now an R group on Discord as well. So you've actually got an abundance of choices. And even for me, like going back to how the pandemic has changed things a little bit, honestly, that is what spurred me on this kind of new venture that I've been doing in the community, which is basically not just sharing content after the fact, so to speak, but actually live streaming it. I would never have done this if the pandemic hadn't happened, but it was a unique way for me and others in even other parts of open source communities to kind of learn by doing, but also bringing in real time feedback from the audience and learn from each other. And I still, to this day, when I do any of these Twitch streams I've been doing lately, I get real time help from the audience as I'm struggling with issues. And that, to be honest, it doesn't happen as much at work because I'm learning these things that are kind of new. But then when I am able to do these open source projects, I'm learning from brilliant people who do all sorts of different data science or software development tech stacks. And they help me troubleshoot within a few minutes. And we just kind of try stuff out live. And I'm not afraid of it anymore. Like I'm not afraid that I'm not going to be perfect. Like I am probably in the group of streamers I network with, I'm probably the least competent in terms of live coding, but I enjoy it because I'm learning something. And it was out of my comfort zone, but it was one of the benefits of being connected to that and having what I would say are real friendships from that core group alone. So that's been a lot of fun for me.
That's awesome. Would you say that the biggest lesson that you've learned from streaming is to just go ahead and try to put yourself out there, and don't be afraid about what you don't know, and just try to get started?
That's definitely it. It's one of those things where in the past I tried to be too perfect with things, even like in the old podcast adventures I did, I tried to be perfect with everything. And now, you know, after seeing what others have done and seeing like other communities just value what they're doing and being more, I hate to say real, but being more authentic with the fact that I'm going to mess up. I'm going to make mistakes here. But you know what? Learning from that is almost just as valuable as seeing the final solution. So that's kind of how I've rationalized it. And it wasn't easy. Like it wasn't easy in the beginning. I felt a little bit of imposter syndrome compared to other things I watched. But now I kind of carved a little bit of a niche and like I said, it's been enjoyable when you get that interaction even if it's online, it's still an interaction that can really help make it more engaging, more entertaining. And like I said, be able to learn from others has been a real joy for me.
Oh, that's awesome. And the imposter syndrome definitely resonates for me. I had a couple themes in 2021, but imposter syndrome is definitely kind of always one of them, and it's a double edged sword. And one of the reasons I think that I've had it in 2021 a little bit is that Shiny has exploded for me professionally, and I think that's due to how agnostic it is. I've built some awesome apps that barely have anything to do with statistics, or barely have anything to do with data. I recently built an app that's just for folks trying to take a quiz in a workshop that doesn't
Right.
really have have much data behind it, but it was really cool, and it was a fun project building
Yeah.
a web application. And because of that, a lot of times I didn't feel like in the past year I leveraged my stats background as much as I would like to on a day-to-day basis. And I know that you come from a stats background as well, Eric. And I also feel on the other side of that coin, like I know I will never know everything there is to know about the latest and greatest with Shiny. And JavaScript is driving so much of the new development. So even the stuff that I am working on full time, I still feel a bit of imposter syndrome because I'll never know everything that I need to know. But that's like anything in tech, right? And there's so many different rabbit holes that you can go down to create cool applications or cool web products, and it's impossible to go down each one of those paths. So I would ask you Eric, now that you manage a couple people as well, are there any ways that you go about communicating, dealing with imposter syndrome, or dealing with it yourself?
Oh, yeah, that hits home because in many ways, I still have this, whether it was like I said earlier, the streaming stuff or otherwise. I think the part I try to tell myself is that there is nobody that I would trust to ask, advice for is going to look down on me for asking these kind of questions. Like there was pressure, especially earlier in my career, where I felt like, okay, I gotta learn this on my own so that I can show that I'd be self-sufficient, that I can hit the ground running. And sometimes that would be a detriment if I was missing a key point where I didn't know the right questions to ask or even just starting a dialogue. And I learned through experience that I'm fortunate that I have a group that is always welcoming to answer questions. Certainly, there's still aspects where I feel a little scared to ask certain things that are more statistical because I feel like I'm almost expected to know that. But I have colleagues that know Bayesian analyses like the back of their hand, and they come from a very talented and one of the leaders in the universities of Bayesian methodologies. And so whenever I ask kind of a basic Bayes question, I'm kind of like almost like ducking my head a little bit, like, okay, don't be nice, but they're always nice about it. But I always feel like that's something I should have known before. But the past is the past. But I try at least with either team members I'm supervising or colleagues that I'm kind of unofficially mentoring to say, take advantage of the resources you have here because you may save yourself a boatload of time and making sure that others can help you out if you ask, early in the process, something that's, preventing you from implementing a solution, writing that function to do a model fit, or understanding what's going on under the hood of these models. Sometimes that's the thing I need to get better at is diagnosing when models don't perform well, not just taking the textbook answers, but really using some of the skills maybe in different ways. And so I think the communication is the key and not being afraid to ask. And like I said, I still struggle with this a little bit, but over time, there were some areas where now if I run into something, I don't hesitate to reach out to my IT colleague about an AWS esoteric thing. And I don't feel bad about it because A, first, I'm not even an IT expert, technically speaking, in the org, but B, it shows that I'm trying something. Just showing that I'm trying something can actually lead to benefits that you might not realize if you just kind of do in your own silo and keep quiet about it and not really communicate that towards the end. And maybe you missed out on something that could have made it even better. So certain aspects I gotten better with, and some aspects I still struggle with. But it is real, and the key is just reassuring whoever you work with that this is okay to feel this way. It's just a matter of feeling confident enough to ask about any issues you're encountering early on before it gets too much to overcome.
Sure, sure. And I appreciate you sharing that with us, and I think some of that reflection in there has to do with ensuring that you have a good team culture as
Yes.
well, where you feel empowered and comfortable
Yes.
to ask questions of others, maybe in different departments, and that you feel comfortable to ask for help and to be in an environment where you can try things, and not worry about too much blowback or anything like that. That you feel empowered to take something on. And I recently listened to an incredible podcast on the Analytics Power Hour, to shout out a competitor, I guess. But JD Long just had an awesome episode. And it was an amazing discussion on psychological safety in the workplace. And he had this point about in his organization, and more specifically his team, that he focuses on the fact that when a mistake is made by an analyst, maybe just in an SQL query or something like that, that they got the sign wrong, instead of weakening the team and the relationships, mistakes actually make the team stronger. And he references Taleb a little bit to talk about building anti-fragile systems and try to build an anti-fragile team instead of a team that's fragile, such that when a mistake is made, management fires that person, or that the analysts on the ground feel pressure to not make mistakes, and he doesn't want that to be the case in the environment. So I would definitely recommend folks check out that episode if they're interested in that kind of topic as well.
Yeah, that's a key point that I had in certain snippets in 2020 and also early in my career is that sometimes things don't work as expected and sometimes they maybe impact the back end, maybe they impact analytical report that you say, "Oh, yeah, I caught this, I need to fix it." It's not about blaming. It's not about feeling like, oh gosh, I'm in trouble now. I'm going to be on the chopping block. No, no, no. These are ways to learn. And I think showing initiative and being proactive about finding solutions is what people value a lot. And it was many years ago, but I've shared this in other places, but I'll share it here. But I had a correlation analysis of some biomarker data that took down our entire HPC cluster, just completely wiped it out in terms of the execution power. And certainly the team, the Linux IT team, sent me a kind note like, "Hey Eric, maybe we could talk about this." And I was scared because this is early in my career. So again, this is kind of like that feeling I just said. Sometimes you feel like, "Oh boy, I just destroyed a huge back end." But no, we use it as a way for me to learn better ways of doing HPC computing. And it started what became one of my most important collaborations in that whole company of working with the research IT folks because we did some really cool stuff after that jointly, whether it was spinning up our studio servers or finding ways to leverage HPC more effectively now with AWS stuff. But they and I think alike, and it actually jump started a very important relationship that made me personally more successful and frankly made a lot of my work more fun that I could work with them and learn from them about the ins and outs of DevOps and how that can translate to data science and stat development. So even a failure may seem like a huge problem at first, but you learn from it and it may lead to even better things down the road. So I'm going to listen to that episode definitely this week when I get a chance. And we'll have a link to that in the show notes for sure.
Awesome. I appreciate that story, and I'm glad that you were able to take it in stride as a learning opportunity and what sounded like the start of some pretty cool work that you were able to collaborate with that team on at your organization. So maybe we can wrap up with kind of your overall, if you want to pick one or two things about your themes for 2021 as you look back on the year.
Yeah, I've thought about this as we were brainstorming earlier, and I think the part that really came into focus this past year was interoperability on both a technical perspective, but also, frankly, a culture perspective. Where, from the tech standpoint, I've been developing more sophisticated, say, Shiny apps, R packages, but they're never just used in isolation. They need more than just R. And in fact, this was in one of my Shiny Dev Series episodes. I can't remember if it was the interview with Colin or elsewhere, but I coined the phrase, "It's never just Shiny." And the reason I said that is because all these things I've been doing this past year interact as Shiny with things like AWS, HPC, Linux clusters, databases hosted in the cloud or on premises. And you deal with these other issues that you're not taught really how to deal with until you get experience, and how the best network or whatever analytical pipeline you have with these different backends, so that you're in sync with changes that they're making, they're in sync with changes you're making. And is it easy? No, not really. But it does underscore the importance of having that communication, that ability to keep up to date with things, and getting into kind of the more the culture or the team aspect of it. I found myself networking with not just my colleagues in the stat group, but also with either research IT, more of the security IT, cloud IT, like all these different IT branches, as well as the you might say the customers of the things we were developing. So you're getting feedback from them on how the UX should be on these different things, whether it was a package or an app. You're getting feedback from these backend services about, whoa, you got to use that. You got to use that API more carefully, or you've got to deal with these quirks that can occur when you call it too much, or things like that. And here's the database schema, so make sure that when you upload stuff to it, it follows that standard, because it gets horribly broken if you don't, kind of thing. So it was a lot of learning about how to network effectively with these different backends, these different teams. And it was not always easy. In fact, I had a couple stumbling blocks. And I think somewhat related to that is the concept of being upfront or making it a priority ahead of time about whatever process or template you want to use to maybe structure your code or structure how you network these different things together. For crying out loud, get that documented early on, because retrospectively putting that in, you lose the ability to have that cognitive, like on the spot recollection of like, I spun up that server because XYZ, or I did that API because of this. Then you're kind of on a detective work to try and figure out, okay, why did we do this? What was the point of it? And in fact, I had to make a spreadsheet of all things, like networking all these model servers that we had. Like, I forgot how many there were. And apparently I wasn't the only one.
Did you
So
just say spreadsheet, Eric?
I said spreadsheet. Yes, I have to live in the Microsoft world a lot. Oh, yes, that's another. But ironically, I'm trying to look at the APIs for Microsoft and make that more fun. But that's another tangent. But it was underscored that if you don't do that prospectively, it just causes more time, more effort in the end to figure out who did what, why they did it, and if there are problems with it, what are alternatives to like those backends. So we've had some growing pains on that in one particular project, but we're trying to rein it in and be a little more upfront about it. But it just underscored that if you don't document these things ahead of time, then you're going to lose some efficiency in who's doing what, why that thing is used. And frankly, even from a code development perspective, I launched in Shiny App and Golem. I made a nice infrastructure out of it, but that wasn't enough. I still should have been more attentive to how it was supposed to be used, because it was taken in directions that I did not foresee, and we're still trying to rein that in. Mike's heard about this offline in some of my specific rants about this, but it's been a learning journey about, you can set it up technically, but you've got to give that, you might say, that README as much polish as you can for that initial developer experience or that collaborator experience. So that was a hard one to learn, but I'm better for it. And my new projects in the future are going to be much more detail oriented from the start and not just tacked on at the end when it's too late.
No, that's great. That's great. I don't know if you have any specific tools for sort of managing and organizing all of that knowledge and tracking the different requests from the different departments. You're talking about, UX feature requests from one team, and then, technical requests maybe from the IT department. One thing that we use a lot at Catchbrook is Lucidchart for building flowcharts, and then we kind of take a picture of just a PNG of that flow chart and stick that in the README. And I found that incredibly useful for non-technical folks who are on this project to understand, kind of the workflow from start to finish. Okay, the user enters something here, they click this button, and it writes out to a database here, or it generates some chart here. That's gone a long way in terms of our working together with clients, especially the maybe non-technical managers on these projects. Another thing that I've discovered in 2021 is, I think it's still in beta, but GitHub now has boards for
Oh,
kind of
yes.
Kanban style issue tracking, and you
Hmm.
can automate. If you open a brand new issue, it will end up right on the to-do list in this board,
That's
which is
cool.
really nice. And
Yeah.
then once you close the issue, it'll end up on the closed or finished, whatever that last board is. And then there's an in progress board by default, and there's a bunch of different ways that you can set things up there. And it also has another toggle view to view things as a list that can be broken down into milestones as well. So we've tried to leverage that a lot here in terms of organizing sort of the project issues and the project tracking. I was wondering if you found any solutions. Spreadsheets can absolutely be a solution if you want them to be, for managing some of those different requests that come in, and organizing the knowledge behind the projects that you're working on.
Yeah, this has been a hot topic recently where yeah, I've been collaborating with a team member who's also very much interested in making this part better from both a documentation side and tracking requests and issues. So what we've done in some of my previous projects is we use like the original version of GitHub project boards where we were able to figure out, okay, what are we going to work on, what are like the backlog, what are in progress, and then be able to automatically close those as we knocked out features. That's worked pretty well from a development perspective. And then one thing I tried in a recent set of apps is that in the app itself, the Shiny app, I would put in a module called feedback, and it would look like a little web form, and they could say, okay, are you experiencing an issue? Here's a high level category to choose from, and then here's like the text you can describe in more detail. And then I wired in the GitHub API, so when they submitted that, it would go onto our issue board directly.
That's very slick. That's very slick. I might need to steal that one from you for an app I'm working on now.
Yeah, yeah. So that could go to either GitHub, or frankly, if you're a Jira shop, that could go to Jira as well, or whatever. Anything that has an API compliant RESTful API that lets you put these in programmatically, I think this is a nice solution. So you don't have to tell the team member, oh wait, if you have an issue, oh wait, you got to go to this form, you got to go outside the app, you got to do your print screenshot thing, and all this. Now, I'm laughing because that's how I started, but then I had a team that kind of vetoed it and they went back to the original way. But but for projects that I'm kind of more of like the director of, if you will, like I'm the team developer slash owner of, I am going to use this solution because we use GitHub for both obviously the code management as well as the development issue tracking. And I consider it when a end user customer has an issue and it's something in the app not working, that's a bug. I need to fix it. And I want to make it as frictionless as possible for them to report it. But every team does it differently. So sometimes your hands are tied depending on what they recommend. But I think the key is automating that process of reporting somehow and making it not an inconvenience for your end user to do it. And that's where having it in the app was kind of like that light bulb moment where I was like, why didn't I think of that sooner? Because GitHub API has been around for a long time. I never really interacted with it until I had a project manager say, hey, Eric, I do need that in a spreadsheet. And I'm like, there is no way in heck I'm going to manually make a spreadsheet and copy paste text from issues. I use the GitHub API to pull that down into an Excel file in R and Shiny, of course, and send that to them in an automated email every week or whatever. And then they use them whatever things they did to make their magical PowerPoint slide of a Gantt chart or whatever. So it worked. You just have to think outside the box to use the tech to your advantage. And that's what I've been trying to do more in 2021 and hopefully this year as well.
No, that's an awesome use case. I have a public facing app that we just developed where I wanted it, it's still sort of in beta.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted users who are experiencing any issues to be able to communicate those issues to me. And I was thinking about just tying some button and some text box to the Blastula package to get me an email. But then I would just take that email and create a GitHub issue
Right.
with it. So your solution absolutely saves me a step. So I appreciate that, and that's something I hadn't even thought through. It wasn't the fact that I couldn't do it technically,
Yeah, and
which
I'm
I still need to figure out the details of, but even conceptually, I hadn't put that together.
yeah, it's actually pretty straightforward, but it's, funny, I didn't think of it either until I had that request from that, project manager about getting that issue board to a spreadsheet. I'm like, that's when I started looking at the API stuff, and I noticed that I know other R packages are using a GitHub API for various things. I was like, let's dive into this. So it took an afternoon, but it wasn't difficult. Once I pulled down, I'm like, well, wait a minute. If I can pull down the issues, surely there's a way to write the issues, and sure enough, there's an endpoint specifically for that. So it was certainly fun to put together because it's one of those things where it's a small thing on the surface, but it adds to that UX of whatever you're producing, and that those things get remembered. Little things like that, or even just frankly the looking of an app also gets remembered a lot from the UX side. So never underestimate, for anybody listening out there, if you think these things don't really add value to like the end goal, they absolutely do. You just may not realize it until it gets in the hands of customers and they start giving you feedback like, you made that so much easier for me, Eric, thank you. And I'm like, oh, that's what I'm trying to do. But you don't really think about that until you get that feedback. So yeah, it was a learning for sure.
That's awesome. I'm going to put you on the spot here to maybe wrap things up, but do you have any goals for 2022? Maybe this would be a good way to finish.
Ooh, yes. I definitely have unofficially I've been thinking of a couple of things. So it's been a learning journey that I started last year, and I want to really kick it to like second or third gear, however you want to call it, of really understanding the under the hood of Shiny, under the hood of the JavaScript interactions, so that I can build even more richer experiences with the front ends I'm producing. So, from a technical standpoint, that's certainly near the top of the list. And then, as kind of in more in the open source in general, I want to share more knowledge in additional mediums that hopefully can be consumed by a lot of people. And that's a long-winded way of saying I have ideas for more tutorials that don't necessarily need to be in a live stream. They could just be some I record on the side and share it online via, say, YouTube or whatnot, and help people out that are like learning some of the new tech that I've been playing with and really see what creations they have. So this was inspired when I saw Thomas Mock from our studio, one of their more prolific members, actually start using OBS for some of the R Studio live streams. And lo and behold, he actually watched one of my very early tutorials on setting up OBS with doing R stuff. And he sent me a note on Twitter just thanking me for it. I'm like, oh my gosh, like that's sweet. And I was like, okay, I got to do more because my setup's changed immensely since then. So I want to do things like that just to ease people's transition into doing new ways of sharing their learning. So I feel like that's something I'm developing a bit of an expertise in, but being able to give people an on ramping to that kind of thing would be another goal of mine, and certainly hoping to get help from feedback from others as I continue that journey as well. But yeah, let's turn it on to you. What are some of your goals for the year?
So, one of my goals is to do some more package development in the open source. I
Nice.
have one open source package on CRAN right now that I'd like to do some more work on. I would like to work some more on beautifying Shiny apps. I've gotten started this year with the BSlib package, and I know there's that outstanding interfaces UI for Shiny. I think that David Grandin
That's
book
right.
that I've started dipping into. I would like to finish that this year and really start applying some of that to my Shiny apps as well. And maybe from a personal standpoint, in a few weeks, my wife and I are expecting, so I would like to be a great dad in 2022.
Oh,
Maybe that's
congratulations.
number one.
Yep, that's awesome. And it's a different experience for sure, but I think you're going to be terrific. It's kind of like what I tell people in other endeavors, but be authentic. You are who you are, and it's always a learning journey. if you think learning JavaScript is hard, you wait till what you're in for. No, not to make it sound harsh, but no, you're going to be learning a lot. But enjoy the time. The early years go fast. So for those that aren't aware, I have two sons. They're 9 and 5 now, but it seems like just yesterday we were doing the whole diaper changing stuff and learning them how to talk and walk. Those go fast. So, like, I thought it was a cliche that people kept telling me, but it's darn true. It does go fast. So I would just say savor the moments and enjoy it, because it's going to be a ride that you'll never forget, for all the good reasons. So
I appreciate that. I'm sure it won't be very long until she's walking around in the background of my R Weekly podcast, trying to fuss my headphones off of my ears. Not that I've ever seen anybody do that on your end
not
there,
at all.
but
Not at all. I don't know where you get that idea from. Yes, it is. The tech toys are some of their favorite toys. Even though I have a whole stack of other toys, it's this little thing I'm wearing. It's this mic I'm speaking on, and the fancy Stream Deck that are the big hits. So
well, thank you for the sage advice. We're a few weeks out here, so once the Our Weekly Highlights podcast rolls back around, I might have to take a couple weeks off, but I promise to get back on the mic after that, and looking forward to it.
yes, yes, absolutely. That we're very eager to see your journey on that. And hopefully, it goes smoothly. And yeah, just to recap what I said earlier for all of you listening, that Mike and I will be back for the our weekly's version of the 2021 wrap up whenever that happens. So it'll probably be in a week or two, depending on where things stand. And then after that, yeah, that's where we're honestly not sure, but rest assured we will be back whenever our weekly formally launches. And again, we appreciate all of your listenership out there. I've heard from a few of you in private DMs that you're enjoying it, and I certainly welcome that. And we want to do our best to showcase this terrific effort. And who knows what happens in the future, but when I started this whole thing, it was also not just to share awareness of our weekly, it was also to see if I could stick with producing content regularly in the audio form, which means that I feel like I've accomplished part of that mission. I think I've done a fairly decent job with this, and that might resurrect something else that I did in the past. Who knows? We'll see what the future holds, but we'll put that teaser out there towards the end. But yeah, so this has been super fun. This is easily the highlight, no pun intended, of my day today, for sure. Talking with you, Mike, about all these journeys we've had. But for those who want to get in touch with you and want to know more about your services, where can they get a hold of you?
Sure. Let us know what you'd like to see on the podcast in 2022. You can find me on Twitter at Mike_Ketchbrook, KETCHBROOK.
Excellent. And I am at the Rcast on Twitter. The YouTube channel is youtube.com/shiny developer series. We got some additional episodes coming up that we have recorded that we'll be sharing shortly. Lots of cool insights from all sorts of Shiny development perspectives. And I'm also doing my little live streaming nonsense on Twitch. Sometimes it's crazy, sometimes it's technical, but either way, we always have fun along the way. And certainly, if you want to give us feedback on the podcast itself, rweekly.org is always there. Hit the podcast link, and then there's a contact page where you can send feedback to us, or don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Mike on Twitter. We're always happy to engage with all of you. And to echo a point Mike said earlier, certainly from a community perspective, definitely check out things like the R4DS Slack, the R Discord, and our open size Slack. These are all great opportunities to network with other members of the R community as a whole. All right. I'll put a bow on this episode, and we'll be back hopefully sooner with the additional recap. So until then, we hope you've had a terrific week, and we'll be back with another edition of our weekly highlights soon. Bye for now. All right. Good job. Let's stop the recording here and